How are you doing? Good morning, my seventh graders. This is Mr. Whitford reaching in. Today we're going to continue working on our Unit 8 worksheets. Today we're working on Unit 8, Lesson 3, which is creating and interpreting dot plots. For the last few lessons, we were talking about samples, populations, random samples, bias samples. Now I'm going to take a sample of data and create a graph from it to be able to, one, interpret it, take some information from it, but also to build up an understanding of how data can be used to deal with real world problems. So today our goal is to create dot plots that reflect a sample data, and we're going to do a little bit of interpreting and discussing certain data that's on these dot plots. So first we're going to start off with the bell work, and the bell work is this: identify the maximum and minimum value from the data below. So you're given this problem. It says Mr. Whitford did a survey to find out how many minutes it takes for his seventh grade students to eat breakfast. The results from my survey are below, and as you can see, there's a list of numbers there: 11, 0, 0, 0, 0, 10, 1, 3, 2, 8, 2, 3, 3, and you get the idea. And each one represents a certain amount of minutes each student told me that they take to eat breakfast. Now, this is not realistic. This is me using an example of information. But the bell work is simply telling me, well, what is the longest time a student took and what is the shortest time a student took? So take a minute to read all the data and tell me what is the longest time and what is the shortest time. You can pause it if you need. All right, great. So I'm hoping that you was able to analyze this data, and from it, you should be able to see that there's a lot of numbers here. But what is the longest time a student took? You should have been able to come to the conclusion that that was 12 minutes. Right, that would have took them 12 minutes. All right, and you can know that this represents minutes because it says it in the actual problem, how many minutes it takes. Okay, so what is the shortest time it takes for students to eat breakfast? And that is 0. Right, now for some of you guys, like, well, that means, what does 0 mean? In terms, that means that they may not even eat breakfast. Right? That means that they may not have breakfast, so it takes them no time because they don't eat breakfast. Right, and some people, yeah, so just so you can understand, what I did just now is I understood that 0 is not necessarily a number in some sense. It's a number, but it's one that means nothing. So what does it mean that they took no time to eat breakfast? That means that they may have not had breakfast, right? That's how I'm interpreting this data that I'm looking at, right? And you can see that there's a number of them. And what you could do is this: you can find out what is the most common time it takes for a student to eat breakfast. You can find out the average time, right? There's a lot of different things, and these are called central tendencies, or are very, they're data like mean, median, and mode, right? Which we're going to go into starting next week to identify the mean, median, mode from a set of data points like this. Now, this is only a sample. It's not a population, because keep in mind, I only surveyed my seventh graders, not all the seventh graders in my building, and not even all the students in my building. So this is a sample of data, right? And I'm taking this sample data from my seventh graders, right? So it's kind of a random sample of my seventh graders, not of all the seventh graders, right? And I'm saying, okay, well, what is the average? Maybe a seventh grader takes, and I just use my students to calculate that, okay? Great. And what we're going to do today is we're going to be talking about creating dot plots. If you need to fill that in, fill it in. I'm clearing it right now, right? And we're going to take time to create dot plots as well as interpret dot plots. These are some visualizing vocabulary we can look at, right? A dot plot is a type of graphic display filled in circles, dots, and a simple scale to compare the counts, frequencies within categories or groups. We're going to be talking about range a little bit, right? Which is similar to what we did in the bell work, right? A range is the difference between the greatest and the least value and a set of numbers. So for example, we said for the longest up here, we said that was 12, right? And I'm just going to fill them in quickly again, right? I'm not going to fill in minutes, but I'm going to fill in the numbers. This is 12. We said 12 here, and we said 0 here. If I was to actually calculate the range for this particular type of data, according to the definition of range, it says the difference between the greatest and the least. So we know the greatest is 12, and difference means subtraction. So what is the range for this data? 12 minus 0, which is 12. Right, so that's the range of the data. It goes anywhere from 0 to 12, which means to calculate the range is 12 different distinct numbers, okay? Another way to talk about range is a word called spread. It's the spread of the data. How spread out is the data? And as we go further into creating something called box plots. We're going to talk about even interquartile range, which is another way to calculate something called the spread of the data. How spread out is the data? The data spread out pretty by 12 different units in this particular case. Okay, so let's get into the meat of what we're going to be doing today. And I believe there's only 2 problems for you to have to complete on your own. So don't, so it's not too overwhelming and it's not too much. Okay, so when you look at creating and interpreting a dot plot, right? I started by telling you students in Mr. Smith's class was surveyed. And now there's a number of ways to represent data. They can be just numbers. It could be on a table. It could be on a graph. It could be on this dot plot, on a histogram, on all these different other ways. And this is a part of understanding data and interpreting it. And as we go further, this is only the intro, so we're just starting it, but you're gonna see a lot of different representations of how we can display data. So far, we looked at only just writing out numbers, right? We talked about population and sample, but now we're gonna look at dot plots as well as a little bit of a table today, which you have seen tables, so they're not new to you. But I want to take this table and create a dot plot from it, okay? So Mrs. Smith's class was surveyed as the number of brothers or sisters were in their families, not including themselves. The results on the table, you can see that Allison said there were 2. You can see that Bernard said he had 4, Carlos had 3, Catherine had 2, and so on and so forth, all the way down to Vincent, which he had 4 brothers and sisters. Now, what I want to do is take this data and create a dot plot. One of the very, a great way to take this data is by saying, okay, I'm going to take every single person, I'm going to put their information on this number line. If you can see, it's a number line that's here, and I apologize, it's a little faded, but it's from 0 to 4, okay? The ones that you have to do later on, they're not, and I'm going to fix this to make sure it's not faded like this. It wasn't meant to be, but it is. And it says a little bit on the bottom here, numbers of brothers and sisters. So this is kind of like a nice little dot plot number line I set up, and it's not complex, right? 0 to 4. And the reason why I know it's 0 to 4 is because when I look at the actual lowest and the highest number, I see the lowest number here is 0. I see the highest number here is 4. When I'm creating a dot plot now on the ones I gave you to create on your own, I already gave you the number line, right? But if I didn't give you the number line, you would first identify, as you did in the bell work, what is the lowest or what is the highest, right? And from those 2, you can always calculate the range, which is doing the highest minus the lowest, and you'll calculate what the range is. However, here, I want to be able to look at the data in my table and take this data and create a dot plot from it. What do I mean? A dot plot is simply what it sounds like. It's just dots, right? And I'm going to go to each person. So Allison said she had 2. So I'm going to put a dot right here. All right? Right? Something like that, right? Now, if your dot looks a little better than mine, that's fine. But I'm just going to be creating dots. So 2 for Allison, right? Bernard, 4. Okay. If you want, I would suggest you could cross them out as you go through them. That way, it's organized and you keep a track of what you already done. So, for example, I can cross out Allison. Cross out Allison because I did that. Cross out Bernard because I did that. Carlos, I'm on is 3, right? And I was using a little marker just now to make it where it look pretty. Now I'm just gonna create them myself, just like you would. Try to create circles, try to make them look pretty. Catherine is 2, so I'm gonna put a 2 right above that. I'm gonna put another dot right above that one, okay? So that's 2 there. All right, Delia, right? She also had 2. Okay. Dion had 1. Emma is a single single child, right? So I'm gonna cross out Dion. It keeps doing a double click. Hold on. Try again. Good. Emma is 0, so I'm gonna cross out and put a 0 here, not there. And you can understand the idea already. It's not so hard. All we're doing is creating dots, and we're making dots on top of one another. We're not making them all smushed together. We're trying to make them as clean as we can. Harley is 3. Okay. Ian is 2. Sorry. Justin is 1. Paul is 1. All right, so I'm going to create 2 dots here. 1, 2. Forgive me if my dots don't look like dots. Okay. Rihanna has 3. Okay. Stanley has 0. And finally, the last one, which is Vincent, he has 4. Okay. Okay. So, and you can just go through each one by one and just cross them out. That way you don't make sure that you correctly plotted their data. Okay. So now that I went through everybody's data, this is what a dot plot looks like now. A lot cleaner than mine is actual dots. Mine's a little scribbles because I'm using technology to create these dots. But you could, you know, make them as pretty as you can, but you can see how the data is spread out. Now, this particular type of dot plot we created, believe it or not, it's not leaning towards one side, not leaning towards another side, which means it's not skewed, right? And you'll hear that word again. It doesn't have any outliers, which is numbers that are so far outside of these basic 4 numbers. Like imagine if I had somebody who said they had 8, right? Or somebody like me who had 7, and they'll put a 7 all the way over there when everybody else's data is here, right? It's no outliers right there. And this is honestly a very normal curve. If you can look at it in some sense, and I would have created a nice little curve. I'm gonna do that real quick, and I'm gonna get rid of it. Right? It's you know, it has a normal curve to it. It goes up in the middle and comes down, right? Which is like a normal curve to some data. Now, not all data will give you this. Definitely not all data you're gonna do, but this is something just to allow you to see how do we take data from a table to create a dot plot. What is the most common number? Now we can go through each one of these other choices, B, C, D, E, and answer them. This is called interpreting our dot plots now, right? Now we're going to interpret the dot plots, take information from it, right? What is the most common number of brothers and sisters in this class? So what's the most common, right? If you look at the dot plot, which one has the most dots? And we can all agree that that has to be 2, right? 2 has to be the one with the most common or the most common number of brothers and sisters. So most people in this class, or the most, not most people, well, the most common number, which is most people, have 2 brothers and sisters, okay? How many students have a total of 3 brothers and sisters? How many students have a total of 3 brothers and sisters? Right, how many students have a total of 3 brothers and 3 sisters? You can count that, 1, 2, 3. There are 3 students, okay? But Mr. Whitford, we put 2 for the most common number. That's the most common number of brothers and sisters. So keep in mind we're reading it, read it correctly. Most common number of brothers and sisters, there's 2. Everybody, the most common is 2 brothers and sisters. However, how many students now have 3 brothers and sisters? There are 3 students that have 3 brothers and sisters. And if you go through them, you'll be able to look at them. Okay, Carlos, Harley, and Rihanna. It's not asking you what are the students, because keep in mind, if it said what students have 3 brothers and sisters, then you would say those 3 people, but it's just saying how many students. So keep that in mind. How many students in total were surveyed? This is a good question. Now, how many students in total were surveyed, right? Now, it's not asking you to add up the total amount of brothers and sisters in total in the class, but how many students were surveyed? So you could go through the list of students here. You can count them: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, right? Which means 15 students. And I would suggest, even if you did that, even if you created your dot plot, that you go back and check to make sure your dots also added to that same amount of students that there were. So I'm gonna count the dots: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yes, there are 15 dots here. There are 15 students. That means that there were a total of 15 students that were surveyed. Okay. How many students have more than 2 brothers and sisters? Now, how many have more than 2 brothers and sisters? Does that include 2 brothers and sisters? No, it doesn't. Now, you got to keep in mind, remember the terminology we used last unit, at least and at most, right? Remember the word at least represents, right, a greater than or equal to sign, whereas at most represents a less than or equal to sign, right? We need to make sure we can distinguish between those 2. You're going to see the word at least in this worksheet. And you need, I think, or at most, one of the 2, and I underline them for you. And that means you need to recognize that that's meaning an inclusion of that particular type of number. Okay? Now, how many students have more than 2 brothers and sisters? I would say 3 and 4. You got to add them together. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 students that have more than 2 brothers and sisters. Okay? Okay? And that's what we're doing. So we're creating dot plots. We're interpreting the data from the dot plot. right? And every now and you'll probably be asked, what's the range? Now, in this particular problem that I gave you here on the modeling, the range is simple. It's 4 minus 0, which means the range here is 4, okay? So we're going to take this information, take the data that I give you in the next couple of problems, and you're going to create dot plots. You're going to interpret the data from the dot plots. And it's a very relaxed day. So it's not complex for you to do. But if you have any questions, as always, put them in the Google Classroom comments. We're going to be going through everyone's worksheets to give you feedback regarding how you're doing, okay? If there's any questions, feel free. If you need to pause it. You can copy down the data. I'm going to clear the text. Okay, thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you needed more help, please feel free to reach out to me, whether it's email or on Google Classroom. Until next time, I will talk to you later.